Welcome back to another episode in this serviced accommodation and short let series. Today I'm going to talk about how I acquired 21 properties in the first 7 months of going into my property journey and what you can learn from that and how I pieced it together through the action that I took and also the different styles and the creativeness to form the portfolio. Yes, it was quick and it created so much stress and strain, but goddamn was it worth it, looking where I am now and how different my life is compared to when it was back then. So let's dive into where it all started. So for me, I actually started with a lease option, and I must admit I probably winged this a bit because I didn't really know much about lease options, read a bit about it, but I managed to pull it off and I managed to get a deal under my belt. The thing was, I couldn't actually get that property rented out. I initially had lease option into a tenant in mind, and I would make, £200-300 a month out of that property, and happy days, one in the portfolio without much outlay. Problem was, I had about 6 or 7 viewings and I couldn't get it rented out. So what I then did was figure out the Airbnb game, and boy am I glad I did. I actually stumbled into a conversation with a friend who was telling me how he was doing it on a flat in the quayside and the nightly rates he was getting. So I quickly worked out, I feel like I'm quite good with numbers, I quickly worked out, okay, that times that over that, it seems as though there's quite a bit of scope there for a bit of uplift. So I quickly went to IKEA, bought 1,500 quid's worth of furniture, spent the next 12 hours setting it up, and took photos at the dawn of the new day as I set it up overnight, and the bookings just started rolling in, and that was me hooked. So my first property was a lease option purchase, or an LOP as it's known, into a short-term rental. I then obviously got hooked on this whole idea and I started to look at the numbers. I then put properties 2 and 3 were actually BRRR purchases using investor money. A lot of people say I can't afford to do stuff, or a lot of people say I don't have the money. My mindset was, how can I afford to do it? How can I find the money? So what I did here was I worked out what the numbers would be to not only purchase the property, but also get the money back to the investor by using 2 things. 1, the refinance, and 2, the cash flow. Because the increased cash flow I quickly saw from the lease option over and above a tenant. So rather than making 250 quid a month, the cash flow was more like 650 to 850, depending on the month, and sometimes into the thousands as this property went on. And as I got more experience, I got more reviews, my account built up, started to understand dynamic pricing, the algorithms, and all the great stuff that we're going to talk about across this series over the next 30 days. So that was kind of my first few properties, and a great insight into that. I'd already started building my net wealth, which was fantastic. It happened a lot sooner. I really didn't know much. I just kept learning on the job. And then numbers 4 and let me think about this now, I'm going back here. Number 4 was a rent-to-rent gig. I remember it now. In fact, numbers 4 to it would be 11 were rent-to-rent. What I basically did was I noticed that across these 3 properties, there was a company kept booking every week, but they kept booking on booking.com. And with booking.com, I get charged fees, so I was starting to get a bit frustrated that they wouldn't book direct, even though I was sending them emails saying, please, if you come back next week, book. Anyway, I did what I should have done long before I did it. I picked the phone up and I spoke to the individual that was making the bookings. She told me that they had an abundance of staff working in the area, not just the ones that were in these properties. And ultimately that got me thinking. I then asked how long they're here for. It was quite an extended amount of stay. They were working on a development. At this time, I just thought Airbnb was people traveling for tourism. Like many of you probably listening today, you probably think it's just all about tourism. It's not. It's the complete opposite, especially in the UK. So for me, it was this contractor market that started to open up. And she asked me if I had enough room for all the other people. Naturally, I said yes, even though I didn't. So I panicked. And basically that got me off my arse to go and find these extra properties so I could fill that contract. In 2 weeks, I acquired and set up all these properties. I did it by picking up the phone to my phone book. I did it by going after my low-hanging fruit. I did it by doing what needs to be done to get the job done, rather than thinking about the excuses as to why I'm not doing it. I found properties, I spoke to people, I told them what I was trying to do, I told them about the contract that I had, and ultimately I then managed to be able to rent the properties and put deals together. This game is a relationship game. It's 100% relationship game. If you speak to people in the right way, you communicate in the right way, you will get the deals that you need. And that's all you have to do. Now, I'm going to have to scratch my head here a bit because it's a long time ago. It seems a long time ago that these were the initial 21. But from 11 to 15, if I remember rightly, I then had a landlord call me. And actually, that's correct. I had a landlord call me and he responded to one of my Facebook ads that I had on, and he thought I was a letting agent and he had a property to let. So I went along and had a conversation with him in a pub, and then I explained what I was doing with the Airbnb game. A lot of landlords don't know this game exists, even though this guy being a landlord for quite some time, he had 21 properties, and I started to talk about how we could make it work. These properties we took on within a joint venture agreement where I would bring the operation, he would bring the property, and we split everything after the costs considered. And that works very well, and even to this day we're currently working with that landlord, working through his full portfolio to get it all implemented into the short-term rental industry as and when his tenants are leaving, and then we're probably having to do a bit of a refurb on some of the properties. After that, I then went into the management side of things. Because of my social media work and because of what I was doing, documenting my journey online, I then got a phone call saying that there was a block of flats that needed managing, and they had seen what I'd done in the space in quite a short period of time, and they felt I was a good operator, so they wanted to dig into it a bit more. We had a few offline conversations, and lo and behold, we then took the flats on. We've still got those flats today, and we have a great relationship with the owner. And that was my first step into the management side of things, or the co-hosting as it's known as. And that has become a big part of my business now, and I would encourage anyone that's looking to get into this. Once you have your systems and processes nailed, you can really start leveraging different revenue streams from this one industry, and that's why it's so magical. So that was kind of how I put together the start of my portfolio in terms of the different deal types and the creativeness. Now, the main thing to note is just focus on a win-win. Focus on adding value to somebody else, focus on solving a problem to somebody else, and you will get there. This was a problem where the person could not and did not want to be a landlord. They had inherited a property, they did not want to be a landlord, that had a bad tenant, that had one experience, they wanted out, okay? This was a problem for a family who again had inherited a property. It was absolutely trashed. It wasn't trashed, sorry. It was unmodernized, should we say, but in today's world, it was a bit scruffy and it needed a lot of work. They didn't want to do the work. They're not property people. They'd inherited the property. They wanted out of it. The second one, or should I say the third one, was an auction property investor who didn't want to do the work on the property that was required, had a tiny bit of movement going on in the house and a lot of damp work, but I put together the offer, pieced it all together and managed to make it work. So that's how I did that. These rent-to-rents was me just literally finding low-hanging fruit and having great conversations with people, asking good questions. Each one of these landlords had a problem, which typically revolved around void properties or bad tenants previously, so they wanted to try something different. And these properties here on the joint venture, that was me just thinking outside the box of how I can make it work with this landlord that didn't just want a fixed rent. He didn't just want a normal tenant rent that he was getting from his tenants right now. He wanted something a bit more. So why not share the wealth? And that's exactly what I showed him to do. And then the management style is just, as I said, that came from me just working hard on social media, documenting my journey and showing that people can trust us to use our service and that we will deliver on the problem that they had, which was obviously a previous management company not doing the job, not paying them on time, etc. So that's how I got my first 21, and a lot of lessons learned in this. I wish I'd got help a lot sooner. I did all of this by myself. I set them all up. I ran all the guests and I blew up. So one thing is that I wish that I'd got help a lot sooner, probably around this sort of 4 or 5 point mark. I wish I'd got some help in. I did learn from that. I got a bookkeeper and I got a VA in, and that started to smooth things down. I then acquired another 40 in the next 6 months because I was able to get back out there on the deal sourcing side of things and building those relationships. But we'll come on to that later on, and that's something that I teach with all my students is how to run effective businesses and how to say no, which is really important, and how to build teams, because if you want to grow, you're going to have to build a team, and you've got to look at investing in staff, and you've got to look at investing in technology. So that's it for today. In the next episode, we're going to be talking about how you can get started in serviced accommodation with no money and also looking at the rent-to-rent strategy in detail. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and the playlist, and give me a little like and comment so you don't miss out on the next episode.